Welcome to Veil Your Window to the World. Get ready to peel back the layers of global news in a fresh and engaging way. Here at Veil, we shine a light on the stories that shape our planet, from breaking headlines to inspiring human interest pieces. Join us as we navigate the complexities of current events, providing clarity and context to what really matters. Stay informed, stay curious, and let's explore the world together. Don't forget to follow for your daily dose of headlines that matter. Today's story is about the diplomatic firestorm. U.S. refugee center in South Africa raided, exposing deep rifts over white refugee policy. Johannesburg, a simmering diplomatic feud between the United States and South Africa erupted into a direct confrontation this week when South African immigration and law enforcement authorities raided a U.S. refugee processing center in Johannesburg. The operation, which resulted in the arrest of 7 Kenyan nationals accused of working illegally, has triggered a fierce exchange of condemnations between Washington and Pretoria, laying bare the deep political fissures caused by the Trump administration's controversial refugee policy for white South Africans. The raid, conducted on Tuesday, targeted a facility discreetly operating in South Africa's commercial hub. According to the South African Department of Home Affairs, the center was not a registered diplomatic mission but a contracted processing hub. Inside, officials found 7 Kenyan nationals working alongside U.S. personnel. South African authorities allege that these workers had entered the country on tourist visas, which strictly prohibit employment. The 7 Kenyan nationals were found to be performing work duties despite having entered the Republic of South Africa on visitor visas, the Department of Home Affairs stated in a press briefing on Wednesday. They have been arrested, declared undesirable persons, and issued with deportation orders banning them from re-entering South Africa for a period of 5 years. The arrests have drawn a blistering response from the United States. The U.S. State Department immediately characterized the raid as an unacceptable interference in its refugee operations. State Department spokesperson Tommy Pigott issued a stern statement, demanding immediate clarification and warning that the United States expects full cooperation and accountability from the South African government. While we respect the sovereignty of host nations, the disruption of lawful U.S. government processing operations is a serious matter, Pigott said. These individuals were supporting a humanitarian mission mandated by the President of the United States. The white refugee controversy. At the heart of this bureaucratic clash lies a deeply sensitive and politically charged directive from the White House. The raided center was reportedly established to process applications specifically for white South Africans, primarily Afrikaners, whom the Trump administration has designated as a priority group for refugee status. Since returning to office, President Donald Trump has frequently amplified claims that white farmers in South Africa face systematic persecution and violence, a narrative that has found traction in conservative U.S. media but is vehemently rejected by the South African government and many international human rights observers. The administration's decision to create a dedicated pathway for Afrikaners to seek asylum in the U.S. has been viewed in Pretoria not merely as a policy disagreement, but as a hostile diplomatic insult. South African officials have repeatedly dismissed the premise of the U.S. program, arguing that there is no state-sanctioned persecution of white citizens and that crime in the country affects all racial groups. The premise of this refugee program is based on misinformation and a distortion of our reality, a spokesperson for the South African Foreign Ministry said. South Africa is a constitutional democracy. While we face challenges with crime, to categorize it as the persecution of a specific minority is factually incorrect. For a foreign government to set up a processing center on our soil based on this false premise, and to staff it with illegal workers, is a violation of our laws and our dignity. The Kenyan Connection and RSC Africa. The operational mechanics of the center have added another layer of complexity to the incident. The raid revealed that the processing work was not being handled directly by U.S. consular staff, but had been outsourced to RSC Africa, Resettlement Support Center Africa, a Kenya-based entity operated by the Church World Service. It is common practice for the U.S. Refugee Admissions Program to contract non-governmental organizations to handle the logistical heavy lifting of case processing, interviewing applicants, compiling biometric data, and preparing security checks. RSC Africa has long been a partner in these efforts across the continent. However, the deployment of Kenyan staff to South Africa on tourist visas to conduct this sensitive work appears to be the legal hook South African authorities used to justify the raid. It raises serious questions about intent and diplomatic protocol, the Home Affairs statement read. Why were foreign nationals brought in on tourist visas to conduct work that was purportedly official U.S. government business? If this was a legitimate diplomatic operation, why circumvent the standard accreditation and work permit channels? Legal experts suggest that while the US has broad latitude to staff its diplomatic missions, contracted operations outside of embassy grounds occupy a greyer legal area. By targeting the contractors rather than US diplomats, South African authorities have managed to enforce domestic labor laws while stopping just short of a direct violation of the Vienna Convention on Diplomatic Relations. A relationship in freefall. This week's raid is the latest and perhaps most volatile chapter in the deteriorating relationship between the two nations. Relations have cooled significantly since 2024, strained by South Africa's non-aligned stance on global geopolitical conflicts and its leadership role in pursuing international legal accountability in the Middle East, moves that have antagonized Washington. The Trump administration has responded with increasing pressure, including threats to review trade agreements such as the African Growth and Opportunity Act, AGOA. The establishment of the Refugee program for Afrikaners was seen by analysts as both a domestic political play for Trump's base and a pointed critique of the African National Congress, ANC, government. This raid was not just about immigration compliance, it was a geopolitical signal, observes Dr. Thabo Makona, a political analyst at the University of Witwatersrand. South Africa is signaling that it will not passively accept what it sees as a propaganda campaign disguised as a refugee program. They found a legal vulnerability, the visa status of the contractors, and they exploited it to shut down the operation. The human cost and future implications. Caught in the middle of this high-stakes diplomatic wrestling match are the applicants themselves and the workers. The 7 Kenyan nationals now face deportation and a 5-year ban from South Africa, a professional catastrophe for humanitarian workers who likely believed they were covered by the umbrella of US government protection. For the white South African applicants hoping for resettlement, the raid throws their future into uncertainty. With the processing center effectively shuttered and the staff deported, the pipeline for the US Afrikaner Priority Program has been severed, at least temporarily. The US Embassy in Pretoria has gone into crisis mode, with high-level talks reportedly underway to resolve the standoff. However, the mood is far from conciliatory. Washington views the raid as a provocation, while Pretoria views the center's existence as an affront to its sovereignty and its reputation. As the dust settles, the incident serves as a stark reminder of how quickly administrative mechanisms, like visa categories and labor inspections, can be weaponized in international disputes. The deportation of 7 contractors may seem like a minor administrative enforcement, but in the context of 2025's volatile geopolitical landscape, it represents a significant escalation. The question now is how the White House will retaliate, and whether the fragile ties between the US and South Africa can withstand the strain. For now, the center remains closed, the workers are being processed for removal, and 2 nations that once shared a robust partnership are staring each other down across a widening diplomatic chasm.